Welcome to Comsverse, everyone. This session is called Direct Routing and Hybrid. And today we'll be presented by Ben Merrills. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you very much, Lee. And so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining me in this Comsverse presentation. So I'm going to be talking about direct routing hybrid. My name is Ben Merrills and I am the founder of a company called Zapappi. So who am I? I started in the telecoms industry in about 2001. I worked for internet service providers, data center providers, and telecoms companies. My background is as a .NET developer who sort of gets involved in all aspects of technology. As you can imagine, working in those different types of businesses, you're exposed to lots of interesting and diverse product sets. After about 2003, I started to focus some personal attention on things like the Asterisk open source PBX. And then about 6 years ago, started looking more at SIP routing products as well, like Camaleio. I'm an open source maintainer, so I have been working with a number of different open source products over the years and also started a number of open source projects. They're all available on GitHub, so if you're interested in that, I suggest you go over and have a quick look. I'm also a husband and proud father of 3, but if I do mention to my wife that I need to just quickly check my slides one last time, I might not be one of those things. Before we get started, obviously, I want to say a huge thank you to all of the Comsverse sponsors, of which we are a gold sponsor. Without sponsors for this kind of community-led conference, obviously they can't happen. We started with Comsverse when it was first going to be an in-person event back where that was April, and obviously now we have the online event, but we really hope that we will see you in person next March, and hopefully we can continue the conversation that we might start today a bit more personally, but of course maybe still socially distanced. So who is Zapappi? We're a company who firmly believe that customers should be able to create something unique that services their needs and that of their customers. We were founded in 2013, originally as a SIP applications platform, allowing customers to create a diverse telecoms product set, which was not carrier dependent. We quickly learned that our main customers were in fact telecoms companies themselves or telecoms resellers. And as a result, we expanded our product portfolio to include more traditional telecoms products such as SIP trunking. That of course now includes things like direct routing as a service as well. And people are really important to our business. We're mostly developers with a strong background in telecommunications, as well as APIs and automation. And internally, we have a combined experience of about 50 years in telecoms and internet services. As I mentioned before, automation for us is something that we strongly believe in. We automate as many of our internal systems as possible. And as a result, we automate also out the products and services that we offer to our customers. So I'll quickly go through a few of the product sets that we have available as a business. We offer numbering, so that's UK standard, non-geographic, free phone and virtual mobile numbers, as well as international numbers in about 167 countries, and porting. We have a number of management portals complete with control over products and services, both at the reseller level and also at the self-service end user level as well. Strongly believe in automated provisioning. All of our products and services use automation wherever and whenever possible. This allows us to deliver services to customers 24/7 without human intervention. And in the case of Microsoft Teams, for example, we quickly realized that PowerShell could be a wall to adoption of direct routing, so created PowerShell automation tools for creating tenants and user level provisioning. So obviously our SIP product portfolio includes SIP trunking and direct routing as a service, and we offer that through our portals and also through our APIs. And of course, at the core of our business is intelligence and applications. We'll touch on a few parts of that today, but we do have a complete voice applications platform, which can sit in the media path, and also things like dynamic routing, which operates at the point of call setup. And if you caught my session yesterday on augmenting dynamic routing, you'll have had a little bit of experience on that. And we're a wholesale company. We operate a wholesale model. That means we offer granular pricing and also a pay for what you use approach to costs. So I'll just give you a quick overview of our talk today. So we're going to go into, of course, what is direct routing hybrid? Why might we need direct routing hybrid within our business or our customers? What are the general approaches that we might take to implement direct routing hybrid? How do they work? Conclusions and next steps, so how we can go about taking that forward into a practical implementation, as well as hopefully some questions and answers towards the end. I do hope that you have some and that we can start a conversation. So first question you may be asking yourselves is, what is direct routing hybrid? In essence, direct routing hybrid is the ability to combine multiple systems together. In this case, we want to combine Microsoft Teams with our existing phone system or PBX. And however, we can only really do that in the case, certainly with Teams, of direct routing because of the abstraction of functionality that provides us outside of the Microsoft calling plan sort of black box. And that's because we need access to the SIP flow within a call. We need to be able to change how inbound and outbound calls are routed, and we don't have access to that within the Microsoft calling plans. So why use direct routing hybrid? That's the next question. Why do I want to combine my on-premise or hosted PBX with Microsoft Teams? Does that not surely sort of defeat the object of unified communications? There are many reasons, however, why you might want to combine them. So we'll look at what a few of those are. We need the best of both worlds. So what do we mean by that? You may have features in your existing PBX that simply don't exist yet inside Microsoft Teams. You may have invested in custom software that's controlling part of, let's say, a contact center. This is often the case with, sort of larger scaled hosted on-site PBXs, larger Avayas, Mitel, so on and so forth. And we may need some functionality that is never going to be available in Microsoft Teams, like fax, for example. I don't think we're ever going to see that inside there. Then the sort of cost. And, I guess you could say, well, is a hybrid approach actually going to cost me more? Well, here you must be sort of considering, if you're here, you must be considering moving to Teams anyway. So, if you've invested heavily in hardware, let's say handsets, multi-node modules for your existing phone system, you're not simply going to scrap that overnight and move straight to Teams. You could be in contract for things like ISDN, that is being phased out, of course, in the UK, but a lot of companies still have it, and they may be on another 1-2 year contract. Why can't you keep both and just use what's right for each person within your organization or each department? Contact agents, need to use existing systems, but do your sales or management team actually need still to be using that phone system? The most simple, however, reason why you might want to look at hybrid is you're looking at a phased migration. If you could phase your approach to moving away from your PBX to Microsoft Teams over a period of time, that's going to be a lot easier for you, a lot less resource intensive than looking at an all-in-one transition. So just some things to be aware of. With direct routing, there are direct routing hybrid. All the approaches rely on direct routing. You can't use this with a Microsoft calling plan. That's just not going to work because you don't have the ability to manipulate the calls or the call traffic in the way that's needed. And there are a number of approaches to direct routing hybrid, but they're certainly by no means all equal. They have different advantages and disadvantages, and some of them will work for scenarios that may apply to one customer that don't apply to another. Some of them certainly complement that phased migration approach that we mentioned, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail in a scenario later on. But let's have a look at two of the approaches that we can use to get direct routing hybrid between Teams and our phone system. So how does direct routing hybrid work, I guess, is the first question. So the first way that we can make it work is something called forking. This, put simply, is the process of sending a call to multiple locations at the same time. This approach, however, like all solutions, does have pros and cons. So let's look at some of the advantages first. I mean, firstly, it's easy to set up. Most SIP routers or SBCs can easily fork calls into multiple branches and create parallel calls. This makes it really easy, for example, to get multiple calls to the same to multiple SIP endpoints at the same time. And it can be a really good solution for simple failover, where we, want to perhaps provide an alternative to our PBX in the event of disaster recovery. However, there are also quite a few downsides. It is pretty bad for any sort of call analytics. Calls hitting the PBX but answered by Teams would show as dropped or unanswered calls, and this can have an impact on call reporting, call center metrics, those kind of things. There's also a few race conditions to be aware of. If no one answers an inbound call, which system is going to divert to voicemail first? What about systems that, for example, don't send earlier media and instead they send a 200 OK and play ringing over that answered call? In that case, those systems will always answer first, even if there is no one at the other end or the call's not going to get answered. This approach also only works really with direct dials, I think, and I'll explain that why I think that in a moment. Would you want to use this approach on things like auto attendance or call queues? Calls can only be answered by one of those endpoints. So like with race conditions, that means that the first one to get there answers the call. And it may be the wrong system that ends up answering that call. However, the single most important, I think, thing to consider is that this really only works with inbound calls. That's the point really where we have the ability to fork the call, and it's only really at the inbound. So what's the second approach? So the second approach is registration-based hybrid. In this method, all calls are sent to the PBX just as normal. However, a component of our SBC or our managed direct routing service is used to register as a handset on that same phone system. So what are the pros and cons of this approach? So some of the advantages are it's targeted at the user level. This has a massive advantage, meaning that we can treat Teams clients as another handset on the phone system. Due to the fact this is simulating a handset to connect to the PBX, to Teams, it's irrelevant what number was dialed. The routing is deferred to the phone system just as normal. And this works really well with existing PBX functionality, of course. So things like, call queues, call recording, all of that continues to work because Teams is just another handset. Analytics will continue to work as well as call reporting. And that's obviously a really helpful factor when looking at the two different approaches. But okay, so what are the disadvantages? So you may have to open up SIP connectivity from outside of your private network for, let's say, on-site PBXs. And you may have resistance from IT administrators or network administrators in facilitating that. And some PBXs, of course, carry additional costs when you want to license more than one handset for an extension. And it may mean that you have to have more licenses, or we may be able to move them around. However, of the two, I think registration works better and gives us more cross compatibility. So let's have a detailed look at forking first. So as we said before, forking is the process of sending a single call to multiple destinations at the same time, so in parallel. So in the example we've got here, a call comes in from the carrier, and our SIP platform at that point is going to do two things at the same time. It's going to send the call firstly it's going to send the call to the SBC, which is connected to Microsoft Teams. But at the same time, it's going to create a second branch, in this case branch B, which goes to our phone system. So now we have two calls that are transiting at the same time. The first branch to answer the call wins. So there's the race condition that we mentioned earlier. And the one that doesn't answer in time will actually get a cancel message, and that's why those kind of, in this situation, we see with call reporting a lot of what would appear to be dropped calls, and it only works in the inbound scenario. We can only push calls into both of those systems using this approach. So obviously the second approach we'll have a detailed look at now, which is the registration method. And as the name implies, what we're going to do is we're going to register. Our SBC needs to register with our phone system as a handset, and it does that using the standard SIP registration method. The good thing here is that the phone system, because it's just treating this as another handset, saves this new location into its contact database for the desired extension number. So let's say extension 1000. Calls to that extension can now be routed to all of the saved contacts. So the phone system, you may already have a situation where you have a desktop client and a hard phone, and you're well aware that both of those are capable of ringing at the same time. And that's because the phone system knows how to send calls to multiple locations in parallel. So calls from the registration service can be made to the PBX as well. So it's a bi-directional process. I can send calls from the PBX to the handset, or the virtual handset if you like, and it can send calls back to the phone system. So I can make a call from Microsoft Teams, have it routed through, and it appear as if it's just coming from that handset. So the second step to this is obviously how calls are routed within this scenario. So here we can see we've got an inbound call. It comes into the SIP trunking service as normal. So nothing has changed as far as the customer is concerned, because that call then just transits across SIP into their traditional PBX. That could be ISDN, we're just assuming SIP in this particular scenario. The PBX makes that decision about where this call needs to go, and in this case, it's extension 1000. So the call is sent to all the contacts. In essence, the phone system is doing forking here, to all the registered locations for that extension, and that whether that be physical or the virtual Teams handsets that we've registered as well. And the key thing here is that this works for outbound calls as well. So if a call is sent from Teams, then the call is routed into the PBX via that hybrid system, as if it were a handset, as we set up in step 1. The PBX dial plan decides the call is for an external location and sends the call out via the normal call flow, in this case to our outbound SIP connectivity. And of course, because the PBX is making all these decisions, all the things that we had previously relied on, that call recording, that analytics, those agents, those call queues, those wallboarding systems, they can all continue to be used. So how does this work in different scenarios? So if we take the scenario of a contact center, a lot of companies can have different departments, and one of those might be, a large customer support department that operates a contact center style setup. So with forking, obviously calls either terminate into Teams or they terminate onto the PBX, and we have no control over where that call is going to go or where it's going to be answered by. So we have limited control. Reporting is segmented. Call recording is therefore unreliable now. And really, we have to maintain all seats for the business on both systems. And if we use forking for things like direct dials, what is the real benefit of that? Are we still going to have the same segmented platform? So then with registration, of course, all our calls are coming into the PBX first. So this means we have a single point of control. All our existing operations developed over time can continue as normal, and we can continue to use our contact center solutions, utilize paid seats in the environment, and we don't have to rush into the training of staff on new systems. All our call reporting is still centralized where we expect it to be, and all the call recordings on the PBX are still there, which is where perhaps our management or team leaders would go to review those as part of that process. So in this situation, the benefits of using a hybrid, well, it provides us predominantly with an interim solution to migrating to Microsoft Teams. We get to retain key parts of functionality that we need in the existing system while transitioning our business to Microsoft Teams. And, in the case of the contact center within this scenario, that might be a long-term migration. Lots of research needs to be done about which contact center solutions we might want to use, how they'll work in our environment, do they meet our needs in terms of skill sets, things like that. So then we can look at a phased approach within the business to Teams. So we can think about how we're going to roll Teams out as an organization. And that might be that we actually just go, do you know what, from day one, everyone will have Teams. But we only want to move people to using Teams for calling where we're going to get easy wins. So, we know that's not the contact center, for example, but what if it were management teams or accounts or sales? We can select those parts of the business that make more sense to target early and use those as part of a rollout plan. And then, of course, we can let the dust settle. We can wait and see what happens. Does it, cause a knee-jerk reaction? Do we need to revise slightly how this is working? Did we underestimate the requirements of a particular department? And then we can repeat, and we just keep following that same process while we develop our rollout strategy across the organization. So what are the conclusions that we can draw from this, and how might we produce our next steps? So, what we can see from this is there are multiple approaches to direct routing hybrid, and we really need to understand why we want to use it before we go picking one of those approaches. We also need to look at who we're using to provide our direct routing solution, whether it be our SBC vendor or a direct routing as a service provider. Do they allow us to have the facilities that we need to make this migration or this transit process into Microsoft Teams? And do we want to manage that ourselves? Do we want to be responsible for managing that hybrid solution? Or do we want someone else to have it done for us. Certainly if we're going to go down the SBC route, that becomes more difficult. We have to mostly be the people who are going to manage that deployment, that setup. If you go with a direct routing as a service provider, they may offer that service, and therefore you can then start to utilize them to help you plan that approach. And of course, we need to create our migration plan. And as we discussed previously, we need then to be looking at our business. Who do we want to migrate? Why do we want to migrate them? So, if it's our sales team, we want to migrate them because they're a relatively easy department to move. Their requirements are low. We might want to migrate our management team because their telephony usage is relatively low. They give us a good test case. And when within our migration plan do we want to look at moving them? Are they early adopters as part of this process? Do they come later in the process in terms of, for example, our contact center? And that really then dictates how we start our journey into Microsoft Teams. So thank you very much. I hope that has been informative. I hope that started to make you think about the different ways that you might look at rolling out Microsoft Teams within your organization, how you might look at your vendors and suppliers to see if they can help you start that journey. There's a breakout session afterwards, so the link to it is there. And of course, there's the session feedback. We would love your feedback. Presentations like this depend on it. Otherwise, we don't know what we did right and what we did wrong. But hopefully you'll go there, leave some feedback, and it won't all be bad. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of Commsverse. I know there's not a lot left, but hopefully I will see you in March and we can pick this up where we've left off. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Ben. A great session. As Ben mentioned, there is going to be a breakout session after this session ends. I'm just going to quickly see if we've got any questions.
Sure.
And then we'll end this session and move into the breakout. So we do have one question.
Okay.
Which is, we have a customer asking about how secure is the SIP trunk over the internet when we connect an SBC in Azure or direct routing as a service with the on-premises legacy PBX without any edge component like another SBC on-prem. What are your thoughts about it? Would it be a nice recommendation to use a site-to-site VPN between Azure and the on-premises PBX subnet? Thank you.
Yeah, no, so good question. Yeah, I mean, my first thought in that scenario is probably some sort of site-to-site VPN. They give you a very low entry point in terms of cost and maintainability for security. Most on-premise routers, lease line routers, whatever, are going to support some sort of IPsec VPN, and there are components within Microsoft Azure. I can't remember what it's called, but there's the Connect product where you can basically fire up that VPN and have that as a managed product as well. So yes, definitely having that security between Microsoft Azure and the customer's on-premise site, easily achievable with something like IPsec, and equally as good as any other sort of security like TLS or something.
Great. Okay. Now I think that's answered that question. I think that's the only question we have. So okay. I think we've posted the link to the breakouts. If anyone wants to join, please do so, and we'll see you on the other side.
Awesome. Thank you, Lee. That's been brilliant.
No worries. Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.